This episode series was done in partnership with and sponsored by Showtime.
The urgent search currently underway for 2 convicted killers. The drama began this weekend when the Khans apparently used power tools to escape New York's Clinton Correctional Facility. Their brazen and meticulous prison break seems straight out of a movie. But for nearby residents, the present danger is real.
Tonight, the first convicts to ever break out of this maximum security prison are on the run, 2 days and counting. 34-year-old David Sweat and 48-year-old Richard Matt, both convicted murderers, now gone without a trace from the Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York.
They could be literally anywhere. We're leaving no stone unturned.
Tonight, investigators at the home of a prison employee, Joyce Mitchell, now part of the investigation into how these 2 inmates were able to pull off such a daring and complex escape.
Hello and welcome to Real Crime Profile. This is Jim Clemente, retired FBI profiler, former New York City prosecutor, and writer-producer on CBS's Criminal Minds. And with me today, electronically, from across the pond is...
Yep, live from London, Laura Richards, former criminal behavioural analyst from New Scotland Yard and founder of Paladin National Stalking Advocacy Service.
And I'm Lisa Zambetti. I'm the casting director for CBS's Criminal Minds, where I cast victims and serial killers and everything in between.
And today we have 2 very special guests.
I am Brett Johnson, co-writer and co-creator, along with
Michael Tolkin, co-writer and co-creator of Escape at Dannemora.
And this is a very interesting topic. We're going to be talking about original Showtime series, Escape at Dannemora. And luckily, we have the co-creators here to tell us how they got this project going.
Yeah, some of you may not recognize the word Dannemora, the town Dannemora, but we're going to tell you all about it because this show is based on a real crime that on June 6th, 2015, the citizens of Clinton County woke up to a very bizarre happening in their town. And so you guys want to tell us what happened that day and what kicked your interest in this case?
Yeah, so technically it began on June 5th. 2 inmates, Richard Matt and David Sweat, at approximately 11 p.m. at lights out, broke out of their cells, entered into the catwalk behind their cells through a hole they had been cutting for 6 months and escaped. They came out of the manhole at midnight. The escape had never been done in this prison's 170-year history. There were escapes before, but not from the main part of the facility, if anyone's on Wikipedia.
So can you describe Dannemora, to people who've never been there, how gothic it looks and how massive it is?
One of the things we did when we first started working on this 6 days into the escape, so the guys were still on the run, and you go onto Google Earth and you look up the town, and it's so strange because the prison and the town, it's in this very small town called Dannemora, which is a suburb, I guess, of Plattsburgh, which is itself a very small city about 6 miles from the Canadian border. And Dannemora, I believe that there's more people in the prison than that live in the town, but it's very odd if you kind of shift the Google Earth image, it almost looks like a brain, and the 2 halves are almost the exact same shape and like mirrors of each other.
That's a great metaphor.
And the prison itself, it's an agglomeration of buildings that have been put together over how many? At least a century.
170 years the place originally opened as it was some sort of asylum, which had a very politically incorrect term like the Center for Deranged Individuals or something like that.
And it's Siberia up there. It's cold. It's barren. There's just forest. There's no industry to speak of except the prison economy.
And you get lake effect snow and rain all year round, right?
All year round. The joke they have up there is there's only 2 seasons in Dannemora, winter and July. And they actually call it Little Siberia too. And by the way, if anyone's looking this up, the actual prison itself is called Clinton Correctional Facility. And when we finally traveled there, we would keep saying it, and everybody would correct us and say, oh, you mean Dannemora, because the town is called Dannemora, and no one calls it Clinton or Clinton Correctional Facility. I don't think I ever heard anyone call it that.
So what piqued your interest in this actual case? What piqued your interest, and when did you actually then decide to go to Dannemora?
Well, we were working. Brett and I had written an episode of Ray Donovan together, and so we were on the set producing it when the breakout happened. And Brian Zurif, was one of the executive producers of the show, started talking to Brett about the breakout and what a great story it was, and are you following it? And then Brett would come to me and say, are you paying attention to this story? Are you following it? And I just had this feeling that I needed to get in on this as quickly as possible. we were having way too much fun making out the backstory, since all we had was available in the New York Times and on NBC as the case got more involved. And I think, just for myself, what really got me hooked on it was when the Matt's artwork first surfaced.
Really?
And he had these sentimental pictures of Hillary Clinton and Martin Luther King, and there was something really poignant, and he was a really good artist, but there was something really poignant about it. And so the notion of this murderer who is a sensitive, progressive artist, this was something original, and this was something that we could really sink our teeth into.
You were immediately looking at him as a character, and a rich character.
Right. I think there's a lot of prison break stories.
Mm-hmm.
So what I think made this story so compelling were the three principal characters.
Right, so we should tell our listeners that it wasn't just a breakout of two inmates, but how they did it, and the people who were, co-conspiring with them, really must have been what made everybody in Hollywood go, we really want to do something about this.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, as a former FBI agent at the time, I remember this happening and hearing about it and thinking, well, I know that place is a fortress. They must have had help.
I don't think, for me personally, I ever would have thought I'd be interested in writing about a prison break. That genre itself, to me, wouldn't be something I'd go for, but almost every prison break film, it's about the logistics. Like, when does the laundry get delivered? When is the spotlight? When do the guys change shifts? And when you research this and you see the way these guys did it, you realize that there is absolutely no way you could ever break out of a real prison in real life, not in a fiction, without a mastery, in fact, of human manipulation. And you need those logistics too. But that is half of the equation. And that really was what set this thing apart. And specifically, the person that they're manipulating is, to me, the greatest character in this whole show, which is Joyce Mitchell, who goes by Tilly, who Patricia Arquette portrays in the series. And very early on, this woman, I would say the two sort of like strange attractors of this were, one, Richard Matt's artwork. That was something that came out really early. And then maybe a few days later, this woman gets arrested. And immediately you're looking at her, and the implications immediately are hitting the news. She slept with both men.
Tell them who she is, though, as far as the prison is.
So Tilly, Joyce Mitchell, was the civilian employee at Taylor Shop Number 1 in Clinton Correctional Facility, where both Richard Matt and David Sweat were inmate employees. So she was basically their manager. She was their boss. And she conducted affairs with them in the room that they call the machine room. It's where they keep spare parts. And it's the only room in the entire prison where there's no corrections officer observing you.
What were they making in this Corfcraft area? Uniforms for prisoners across the country, right?
It's New York State. They make a lot of different stuff. In fact, Corcraft, if you research it, there's a lot of things they make. They make furniture. Oh. When we went, we actually met the governor, Andrew Cuomo, who's very crucial to helping us get some of the locations that we filmed at. He had in his office, he was very proud of it, a filing cabinet that's made by Corcraft.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And Corcraft is basically a corporation that is run by the Department of Corrections for the state of New York, and they create all sorts of stuff, and it's divvied up. In fact, if you call the DMV, I'm told, in New York, you're talking to a Corcraft prisoner at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility, which is actually where Tilly is. I don't know. I haven't heard whether or not she's on the line.
Spoiler alert, yeah.
But this prison in particular, their expertise was textiles. And it's also worth talking about because this is something that, if we wish we had 500 hours to make this show, but in 8 hours, there's no room for it. This entire area of what they call the North Country, it's not upstate New York, this is the North Country. It's beyond upstate.
Oh.
And this entire area was textile, mills and factories.
Old mill towns.
Yeah, old mill towns. And in fact, Joyce Mitchell worked at a place called True Stitch Slipper Factory in Bombay, and it closed down. And the only employer left were the prisons. And so it's gotten to the point now where in this area, something like 80% of the population is employed by the prison system in some way.
And her mother was a stitcher, was in the industry too.
Yes,
Yeah.
her mother also worked at True Stitch, and that's why she went by Tilly, because her mom was Joyce.
Right.
And so everybody, when they said Joyce, they thought of her mom.
What is the level of security at this prison?
It's a maximum security prison.
So
there is a super max thing.
There's only one.
Differentiation. I think
Yes.
that's 5 points in prison, but this is not. I think it's maybe too old to be considered a supermax.
So just to backtrack a little bit, the people the casting in it is Benicio del Toro playing Matt, one of the prisoners, and Paul Dano playing Sweat. And then Tilly, or Joyce, is played by Patricia Arquette. And I've got to say, the acting in it is just superb. I mean, Patricia Arquette in particular certainly seems to be Emmy-worthy in this.
Yeah, I mean, she's totally transformed herself. She's wearing contact lenses, right? Her eyes are really blue. She
Contact
looks...
lenses, false teeth.
Yeah, she looks unrecognizable. And even her carriage, the way that she walks and trudges and the accent. Oh, don't even get me. I mean...
She just inhabits the part, doesn't she? It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
What's going on between you and her?
Who?
You know who, the chick who works at the front gate. I saw you making eyes. You men can be sluts too, But remember one thing, if and when you ever think about cheating on me, I'll know about it before you do.
She gained a great deal of weight. In fact, the first time we met her, we had hired somebody to help her gain weight quickly. I'd never need such a person. But
Me neither. How do you do that? What is the...
Well,
I didn't even know there was such a person.
Why would you want to do that? But anyway.
In 1 2-hour meeting, I think I watched her eat a half a wheel of brie, 5 donuts, 6 Coca-Colas. I'm not kidding. And what this guy did and what she said, this guy told her was the absolute best thing you can do is right before you go to sleep, eat ice cream. And I was thinking, I do that
every day.
Yeah.
And nobody's offered you a part in the show.
Yeah, exactly. I've been playing Tilly my whole life.
And Eric Lang, the actor who plays her husband, also had to bulk up.
I was going to just mention him, by the way, because I have known this actor for 20 years at least.
Right.
And when I saw this character, Lyle, he plays Tilly's husband, on the screen, I'm like, who is that?
Right.
They must have gotten a local actor, because there's a lot of theater up in that part of New York. They must have gotten like a local actor. This guy, I could not figure out who it was. And when I looked it up and I saw it was Eric Lang, he did Criminal Minds, actually.
Really?
He was in Tabula Rasa.
And he played the CIA agent in Narcos.
Oh my God, he's been in everything, and he is unrecognizable, and he's amazing.
Yeah.
Talk about a slouch, and I mean, he's amazing in this. So
This guy went on Good Morning America. The real Lyle Mitchell did. And he has such, there's a North Country accent, and then he's kind of got his own way of talking that is completely unique to him. And
It's called an idiolect, by the way.
is that right?
Yeah, it's an idiolect.
If she was making eyes at us, probably because we never gave any money to Lumpy's can.
Don't try and change the subject.
I'm not changing anything. I love you, Cupcake.
When we wrote this part, when we first started getting auditions in, it was very difficult. There's something, when you've probably experienced this. If you write something and the first few auditions come in and they're not quite right, you start to think my writing is wrong. There's something wrong with our scene here. And then I just remember, and I don't want to make it seem like nobody. I mean, we had some good auditions, but we weren't quite. And then I just remember Ben came in one day and said, "Have you seen the Eric Lang tape?" And we pulled it up, and it was just, the guy is phenomenal. He transforms. One of the weirdest, and he's so different as a person than his character. And one of the most surreal things would be when he would take out the prosthetic teeth, but he'd still have his wig on, and you'd be on set talking to him about politics or something in his normal voice with his normal teeth. It was like being in a David Lynch movie or something.
Right.
Wow.
But he also shaved too. I don't think I've ever seen him without his kind of telltale beard and goatee and stuff. He's always had that. And, oh my gosh, it's amazing.
Yeah. He's really the thing a lot of people mention when they watch the show is who is that guy? And that's Eric Lang, and he's amazing.
Awesome.
This episode is brought to you by Showtime and the new limited event series, Escape at Dannemora.
Directed by Ben Stiller and starring Benicio del Toro, Patricia Arquette, and Paul Dano.
Based on bizarre but true events, Escape at Dannemora tells the story of two prisoners who broke out of a maximum security prison in upstate New York.
And their twisted relationship with the female prison employee who aided in their escape.
Thrilling, emotional, dark, and unbelievable. In the town of Dannemora, it's not just the prisoners who are looking for a way out.
Escape at Dannemora premieres November 18th at 10 p.m. only on Showtime.
To try a free month of Showtime, go to Showtime.com and enter code RCP30. That's code RCP30 at Showtime.com. This offer is for first-time subscribers only and expires on the 7th of December.
And the sensational aspect of it is, yeah, these guys popped out and they, how did they escape? But what's interesting to me is the relationships that developed inside the prison between the people who work there, the people who are inmates, and how this, was actually possible.
Ben Stiller didn't follow the search closely. Stiller says when two writers approached him about telling the story, he said no, there weren't enough facts. But that, he says, changed when the Inspector General's report came out.
Basically, it was this sort of 160-page turner about the story, and I came back to them. I said, hey, if we can base it off of this, these real facts, let's start again and really try to just tell everything as it actually happened as much as we can.
The person who directed this is Ben Stiller. It was entirely under his direction, is that right?
Every episode, every minute. We were working on this for a year until we met Ben, and so now we've been working with Ben for 27 months.
Wow.
And
wow.
He just transformed himself, too, as well. We have had a couple of people ask us some question along the lines of, well, hasn't Ben mostly done comedies? And so this is like a drama. How was that? And what I always think is, well, look at these comedies. This is not like four, this is not four guys. Well, it's also, they're very complex cinematically. This is not four guys farting, with like a lot of improv and that type of thing. These are really ambitious, really dark, really sophisticated comedies. Tropic Thunder, Cable Guy. I mean, and he has been. I think he'd been itching to do something like this, and cares so deeply about the authenticity, and really always pushed us to get more real and more authentic. And one of the questions you asked earlier was, when did you finally travel there? That's when. Because when Ben came on board, he said, well, we got to go. And suddenly we're on a small jet on the way to Dannemora, where we had only visited through Yelp and Google Maps.
I think that Ben pushed us to make the show as real as possible, but there was a gap. He had circled the project. He'd been interested in it for a while. Brett and I had written the first 2 chapters and a bit of a Bible as a to present it. And then he backed away, and then a year to the day after the breakout, the State Inspector General released her report on what happened.
And I should just say, too, the reason why Ben initially didn't want to do it is because he went through the scripts and he said, okay, this is interesting, this is cool, but what really happened? And the truth is, we just had reached our limit of research. It was only what was in the newspaper articles, and we had to speculate. And Ben thought, well, I just only want to do it if I can make it completely real.
Right.
2 weeks go by, and as Michael said, on the year to the day of the escape, the Inspector General of the state of New York releases her report, and we kind of thought that there was some report coming, but we don't know what it's going to be. Is it going to be some 10-page PDF? This is 176 pages. It's got every prop you'd ever want. It's got the sex scenes in the back. It's got discussions of the people talking about killing her husband.
And it's written like Thoreau had written something. Had written a report. It's written like Walden. It's written with such detail. It's written with such care and such attention to the details, and a kind of there's a surface of a calm surface so that underneath the drama really comes out, and it's one mind-blowing fact after detail after another.
What a gift for you to have that document and the detail and so well written.
It's the reason the show works.
Yeah.
And I will also say, you're always trying to put real events to inspire you when you're writing a scene. There is, without giving away any spoilers, there is a thing that happened that is true during this escape attempt. It's dramatized in our show in episode 4, where these guys are given a gift. They had no idea this thing was coming, and when it happens, if it wouldn't have happened, they would have never made it out. And all that we kept thinking when we were writing that scene and building to that scene is that was the equivalent of when the Inspector General's report came out. But at the same time, had we not already been writing it when that report came out, just like if these guys hadn't already been escaping when this event happened, they would have never benefited from it, and we wouldn't have either. And there's something mystical.
I also want to say something about Ben and the reality of the show. We got to shoot in the prison itself. We shot at the manhole cover that they escaped from. We shot outside the walls. We have a level of reality that would have been impossible if with any director other than Ben. Ben went out of his way to develop goodwill for the project in town because it was an embarrassment to the town. They didn't want to have to relive it again. I don't think that there's a town there's a house in Plattsburgh or Clinton that doesn't have a selfie with Ben over the mantelpiece.
Wow. Well, he is driven like that.
He just did that. It's like, he went to the governor, he went to the state authorities, and he presented what he wanted to do. And so the reality of the show, the texture of the reality of the show is so much to him.
Yeah, my brother and I have worked with Ben before, developing, and when he was shooting Meet the Fockers, we met him because we were working with De Niro at that time. And it's funny because I had actually met him quite a few years earlier in 2004 when it was the night before I was having a bone marrow transplant, and my brother kind of snuck me into the Bruce Springsteen Rock the Vote concert, and guess who was sitting next to me? Ben Stiller. So I gave him an FBI hat that night, and I went in for a bone marrow transplant the next day, and so years later when I met him with De Niro, I said, "Oh yeah, well I met you before at the Springsteen concert in D.C." And I said, "I gave you my FBI hat." He goes, "You lived?" I was like, "I think so." And anyway, but then that started a really great cooperation between me and my brother and him, and we could see the projects that he was working on. I know he was going to Africa, and we helped him a little bit with the security and so forth, and the plans that he made, he definitely does look for authenticity, and it's a great thing.
Right, but not only just the authenticity of doing it where this took place, but can you talk a little bit about the uniqueness of this prison, the facility itself, and all of the things that...
North Yards, take it away.
The North Yard, so every prison has a yard. One of the rules is that inmates get recreation time. One of the things that we realized right away was that this prison had this yard, it's called the North Yard, and it is unlike anything at any prison in the United States or anywhere in the world. And there's very sketchy information about it online. It's divided up, first of all, geographically speaking. There's a flat part area they call the flats that's kind of covered in dirt. And then there's a large hill that's almost convex, and it almost looks like an amphitheater. And on that large hill, it's subdivided into these little plots of land called courts. And they're numbered in some completely arcane manner. I mean, to look at it, if you were any type of person that likes organization, it would give you a seizure. Because it goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 274, 183. And this system has been in place for over 100 years. And the way it works is that these pieces of land are basically owned by the inmates. There's like a whole lottery system. I think 6 inmates can share one. They have gardens on them, incredibly elaborate gardens in some cases. I mean, I'm talking about kale, radicchio, everything. And there's like a whole system with seeds, and they have a pipe that's bent so that you can split wood on it. They've got stoves. I mean, these guys are smoking fish. These guys, it's incredibly elaborate. And when you see it, when we first started learning about this, you think, how does this go on? How do they allow for it? And basically, it's an incredibly brilliant, and it won't be seen this way because a prison break happened, so people will probably say, well, they were too lax, and this is why the escape happened. But one of the really brilliant things about this court system is when we needed to understand about this, I should talk about Eric Jensen. We saw on CNN this guy, Eric Jensen, go on as an expert because he had been in the prison.
After the break, right?
After the break.
Yeah.
After the break, he would come on and he was actually in the tailor shop with Tilly and with Matt and Sweat. So I found him on Twitter. I contacted him, and he called me. And, I said, look, we're writing this thing. We're writing it in Hollywood, what they call on spec. That means we're not getting paid anything, so I can't promise you anything. But we really think this is going to get made. And if it does, we promise to make you a consultant and you'll be involved. And he was. He was a consultant on the show.
Another
He was
gift.
on set every day.
And he's an actor. We cast him, too, and he does a really good job.
Yeah, he's in episode 5. He's got 2 great scenes with Benicio. He's fantastic. I mean, it's beautiful. He's actually a really talented writer as well. And he explained, I said in one of our first conversations, how does this work, giving so many privileges to the guys? And he says, well, here's the thing is, they called the North Yard the Coliseum. The reason they call it that is because if 2 guys, and you're talking about 80% of these prisoners either raped or killed somebody. This is like the worst of the worst. 2 of these guys who have horrible tempers, who are hugely inclined towards violence, if they have some sort of altercation and they're about to fight, they will not fight on the court. They will pause, go down to the flats. When that happens, everybody in the courts lines up in their chairs at the edge like an amphitheater, and they watch them fight. It basically polices itself in that way. I mean, you'll have sometimes, like, I think 800 inmates on there when it's summertime, and you'll have, like, 4 corrections officers.
Yeah. And so they do that because if they fought up on the hill,
they'd lose it.
Do you think they're going to get caught?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I do. I do.
Why? They don't seem to have much experience out in the wilderness, but it has been a significant amount of time so far.
It has been, but they don't know where they're going. Their plan fell through the moment they popped their head through that manhole, and Joyce wasn't there waiting for them. Now, I think they're just going where they have to go, any which way.
When you were there, did you have a sense of the layout of the prison? Because it seems like they were able to develop a sense of the layout of the prison.
Well, let me tell you something. In the tailor shop, you have windows that face Dannemora. They face actually out over the wall. And you can actually see from the tailor shop windows that street where it intersects and where that manhole cover is. You can see the whole town. Yes, you can.
One of the things we read in a transcript with David Sweat early on, there's a thing that happens during the course of their escape where his relationship with Tilly gets kind of discovered, and he's thrown out of the tailor shop, and he's thrown out of his cell. He has to move cells. And in the transcript, he said, when that happened, I lost everything. And I remember reading that and thinking, well, what are you talking about? You lost everything. You're in prison. You've got nothing. But when you start to learn about it, you realize, no, there is a great deal that you have. And what you have is a job. Those jobs, you can get a raise. It doesn't go up that high. In fact, the minimum wage is 37 cents an hour, which we looked up was actually the original minimum wage in like 1934.
Which means in 1934 they were making a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Right, true. And it goes up to 87 cents an hour or whatever, but it's like, those are incentives. If you lose your court, that's huge. These people wait years to get a court, and some guy either gets out or more than likely dies. Then there's like an auction or a raffle of some type, and
and somebody else gets it.
And someone else gets it. And that's a really big deal. It's respect, and there is, if you what I learned from it, or what I took away from it, is if you don't give them something to lose, then they're going to not have any incentive to not be violent.
And so, can you describe for our listeners how big these plots or courts are? I mean, are we talking about...
It's a football field.
The whole thing is like a football field, but each individual court, you're talking about, 10 feet by, 10 feet, something like that. But again, it's not...
Terrace, it's like Rice Paddy Terrace.
Right.
It looks like, that's one way to think about it.
Yeah, and they're not equal. And there's like, you'd think, oh, okay, it's like a prison, so everything's got to be equal. There's none of that up there. This thing has been there 100 years. One of them's this size, one of them's that side, one of them's got good light. These ones are bad. The ones in the middle are no good. The ones off in the corner and the lower and like I think it's the northeast corner are the Italians. I mean, this is like
right.
mafia.
What was it? Warren Miller. I think it's Warren Miller.
Yeah.
Went up to the North Yard. There was a ski jump there.
Yeah.
So you can probably Google Warren Miller ski jump Dannemora Clinton Correctional.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube and see it. And they go off the jump and land badly, and they're having a good time.
But the shot that you took of it was just incredible. This wide shot of it, and you come in closer, and it almost looks like a farmer's market. Like you have Benicio's character going up to almost like a vendor, and it was just really stunning to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a barter economy. I mean, there's like guys that are, doing barbershops in there, all sorts of stuff.
In terms of how this has been produced, it's probably one of the most accurate crime shows, isn't it? I mean, it's based on a real story, but just in terms of the details.
I would hope so.
Yeah, that's what we really worked towards.
I would feel really sorry for the show that was more accurate than this, because the amount of research that went into it, I mean, never ending. And I come from a research background. I was actually in charge of research on Mad Men for 2 seasons. That was my first sort of job in this line of work, and that was a very demanding job. But regardless of the amount of research I did, those were fictional people. So the research that you're doing is what is the income tax rate? How did childbirth happen? What news was happening moment by moment during the JFK assassination? Those types of things. This is literally everything. And there were times at which we would try so hard, and it's like, you almost got to the point where you're like, are we through the looking glass? Like, are we trying to trick God into thinking that this is actually the reality?
And we really wanted to keep violence to a minimum at the beginning of the show, to delay as much as possible, to delay violence in the prison, to delay violence in the show. Because it's the prison, as we understand it, is not an ongoing act of rape and violence and people's throats being slit with the razor blades attached to toothbrushes, that it's boring, that it's mundane, that there's a job to be done, that when they're walked, there's a guard all the time. And I think one of my favorite shots in the show is just it's the rain, it's the prison yard, which was the prison we used. We shot the exteriors in a prison in Pittsburgh, and the guys are walking along. They're wearing these plastic ponchos. The guard is walking, the correction officer is walking them. There's 15, 20 people in the line, and you just think, this is their life. This is their life, and how horrible it is, and how boring it is, and how restricted it is,
Yeah, and how cold and institutional.
And cold, right.
Yeah.
And how deserved it is. We should also put that out. A deserved life for them. And, normally, Brett and Michael, on our show, we usually talk about the victims first. And for spoiler purposes, we're going to delay talking about that until those episodes air. And we're really kind of coming at it from a different way. We're not here to glorify these characters, for the lives that they lived.
So when is the series going to start?
November 18th, it'll premiere on Showtime, and it'll air for 7 consecutive weeks. It's 8 hours long, but the finale is a 2-hour.
Well, that's great. That's amazing.
Thank you so much for coming in and spending time with us. It's so great to meet you face to face. And
thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about Escape at Dannemora. And next episode, we'll go into more details about this amazing series that everybody's going to have to watch. Till next time, thank you for listening.
If you like our podcasts, there are a few things you can do. You can take 2 minutes and go to Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. You can also check out all Real Crime Profile offers and promotions and our sponsors in our show notes. Another thing you can do is go to Facebook and like our Facebook page, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Real Crime Profile without the E. And one last thing, please tell your friends, family and colleagues about us and spread the Real Crime Profile word. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate all of our listeners.
Real Crime Profile is produced and edited by Paul Francis Sullivan. Sound engineering by Mike Thal. Music is composed by Simba Tsumba. Logo art by Jim Clementi. Real Crime Profile is produced by XG Productions and distributed by Wondery.
For advice and support if you're experiencing stalking in the UK, you can contact Paladin National Stalking Advocacy Service on 0203 866 4107, or you can go to the website where there's a lot of information and advice that you can follow on www.paladinservice.co.uk. If you're experiencing domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Violence Helpline for free on 0800 2000 247. In the US, if you're experiencing domestic abuse and need advice, shelter or counselling, you can call Genesis, the 24-hour hotline, on 214-946-4357. You can also go to their website for further advice or support, www.genesisshelter.org. And there's the domestic violence hotline on 800 799 7233.